All right. Next item. This is from NPR. Airline passengers could be in for a rougher ride thanks to climate change. So, Rob, you found this. This is kind of interesting. This links climate change to what? Turbulence?
Well, there's been so many reports about severe turbulence over the last few months that people are beginning to wonder if the number of those reports has increased. And they found out the research for the story found out that it has indeed, the number has increased. And some climatologists are predicting, or philosophizing, I should say, that it is the increase in severe turbulence incidents is tied to the amount of CO2 that we're throwing into the atmosphere, and that it's changing temperatures and airflows and things in the jet stream, which, of course, is making the occurrences of severe turbulence producing them more often, I should say. And of course, severe, turbulence is just air from different directions and different, altitudes, all kind of coming together and bumping into one another. And of course, when an airplane flies through that, sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down, sometimes it's left, right. And the main thing is that people don't often have their seatbelts on when they're flying in what they consider smooth air. And there have been a couple of injuries.
Right. This is about clear air turbulence, right? Not turbulence that's associated with clouds or storms or weather or that kind of thing. And generally at altitudes above 15,000 feet, where you're in the jet stream. And when you have wind shear taking place, that's the turbulence they're talking about here, this clear air turbulence. And so, as you mentioned, Rob, there are a number of studies. There was a 2019 study that was co-authored by the professor from the University of Reading in England that the article talks about. But he co-authored this study based on satellite observations. And they found that the amount of wind shear in the jet stream increased by 15% since 1979. And then there was a follow-up study that they did where they used climate model simulations to predict that clear air turbulence in the middle latitudes of the Northern Hemisphere could triple in the next 3 to 6 decades. And then the third study cited is a 2020 study by China-based scientists who said that increased temperatures in the upper atmosphere are contributing to, quote, a profound effect on the wind shear and turbulence in mid-latitudes. Now, of course, the jet stream is oftentimes where you want to fly because you've got the boost, so you use less fuel, which means you put less junk into the atmosphere. But besides using less fuel, you get there faster if you're going with the jet stream, obviously.
I was just going to say we need to be sure that we're talking about.
Yes, yeah. It doesn't work both ways, right? You only get the benefit in one direction. But airlines are, not, at least initially, going to want to consider not flying in the jet stream as a solution to increased turbulence, certainly.
Well, because, of course, that's going to slow the flight somewhat, or if they try to avoid it, it means a more circuitous routing, but also more fuel burn, which puts more junk in the atmosphere. So, but then, it would also help, I think, if people just sat in the stupid seats and kept their seatbelts on. If you have to get up to go to the powder room, as we call it, that's fine. But just realize that it's always a chance, because this can hit with absolutely zero notice. And the hardest part is that the flight attendants usually take the worst of the beatings because they're up and about.
Right. In fact, the NTSB found that 80% of those kinds of injuries are with flight crews. The NTSB said that turbulence is the most common type of accident aboard aircraft. And from 2009 to 2022, the NTSB recorded 163 serious injuries resulting from turbulence. And some of them were pretty serious, major fractures, serious burns. I imagine that's from flight attendants and coffee or something, I guess. Internal bleeding and other injuries. But again, that flight crews accounted for 80% of all of these kinds of injuries.
And believe it or not, we didn't come up with this topic or this story just to nudge a couple of our readers a couple of our listeners who wrote in and said they didn't appreciate our comments about carrying lap babies on airline flights, but this just happened. We're just reporting the news facts. The news, folks. All right, I'm a lousy.
And I threw a new article in the show notes that we talk about climate change and not to get on your high hopes or stuff, but it does affect so much. There was a new study out that's showing that as climate change changes, baseball is going to have more home runs because of the climate change, because of the weather in the atmosphere. That people are going to hit more home runs, and with less steroid intake, unlike what we had previously. There's so many of these little things that are.
I'm crazy.
I know.
Okay, David, you've got to explain that. How are people going to hit more home runs?
Thinner air, and so it's easier to accelerate the ball through the air with a given amount of force. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, that's pretty much
basic aerodynamics.
Basic physics. Yeah.
Density, altitude. All right, super.
I mean, there's a reason why it's easier to throw a football at Mile High Stadium than it is to throw it down in San Francisco. The sea level versus over a mile high. All of this stuff sort of adds together, and if the simplest comment is wear your seatbelt. Whether you're in a car or on an airplane, wear your seatbelt. It's designed to save your life, and it doesn't cost you anything to do it.
Yeah, the first time I ran across this was just a month or so ago, a similar story talking about worse turbulence because of climate change. Never really considered that before, and I just thought, oh, great. Of all the different things we have to worry about, now flying is going to get even worse. Now, granted, the rate of change seems to be relatively small, which means that it's probably not going to double in our lifetimes. And I'm looking at my co-host as I say that, though there's some of you out there listening young enough who might see that. But a related thing, I just saw a story yesterday. It said first ever April tropical storm could spin up in Gulf of Mexico. So, yeah, things are changing.
Yeah, they are. At least we seem to be seeing the evidence of that.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point, though, what Max just made. A lot of people tend to discount these kinds of stories because they say, in 4 or 5 decades or 6 decades, they go, I'm not going to be around anyway, so who cares? Well, okay, but hopefully somebody's going to be around.
Yeah. Children, grandchildren.
Yeah, we can bet that the airlines won't be flying at 20,000 feet to stay out of the jet stream because the cost of fuel is going to be so huge. But who knows? Maybe by then the Hyperloop will cover the entire country and it'll all be ground-based transportation at 200 miles an hour. I mean, it could happen, right?
It could.
Not very likely.